The warning came at 0347 hours, Galactic Standard Time. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the command center of the USS Defiance, humanity's flagship, watching the holographic display show what every species in the known galaxy feared most: a Corvaxi invasion fleet. The alien armada stretched across space like a metallic plague. Thousands of ships, each one the size of a small moon, their dark hulls bristling with weapons that could crack planets. The Corvaxi had earned their reputation through 3 centuries of conquest. They were the apex predators of the galaxy, a species that viewed all other life as either slaves or obstacles to be removed. "Ma'am, we're receiving transmissions from the Zephyrian homeworld," Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez reported, his voice tight with concern. "They're requesting immediate assistance." Chen's jaw tightened. The Zephyrians were humanity's closest allies, a peaceful species of crystalline beings who had shared their advanced shield technology with Earth 50 years ago. When humanity had first stumbled into the galactic community, lost and technologically inferior, the Zephyrians had been the only ones to extend a helping hand. "Show me," Chen ordered. The main display shifted to show Zephyr Prime, a beautiful world of floating crystal cities and aurora-painted skies. But now, those skies were filled with terror. Corvaxi scout ships darted between the crystal spires like deadly insects, their energy weapons turning centuries of architectural beauty into glowing slag. A transmission crackled through the speakers. The voice belonged to High Curator Vexthan, the Zephyrian leader whose wisdom had guided humanity's integration into galactic politics. "Admiral Chen?" The voice was strained, each word carrying the weight of desperation. "The Corvaxi have given us the standard ultimatum: surrender within 48 hours or face complete annihilation. Our defensive grid is holding, but their fleet—" The transmission cut to static for a moment. "Their fleet is unlike anything we've seen. We estimate over 10,000 ships." Chen felt the weight of every eye in the command center on her. The Corvaxi had never been challenged. When they came for a world, that world fell. It was the natural order of things in this galaxy. The strong consumed the weak, and the Corvaxi were the strongest predators that had ever evolved. "Ma'am," her tactical officer, Commander Kim, spoke quietly. "Our entire fleet consists of 300 ships. The Galactic Council's military assessment puts our chances of victory at—" He paused, checking his datapad. 0%. A bitter laugh escaped Chen's lips. 0%. That's what the galaxy thought of humanity. They saw humans as the new species, the ones who had barely mastered interstellar travel when most civilizations were already ancient. What they didn't understand was that humanity had spent its entire existence proving impossible odds wrong. "Open a channel to Earth Command," Chen ordered. "Priority Alpha." The holographic form of President Williams appeared, her expression grim but determined. Behind her, the emergency session of the Global Defense Council was already in progress. "Admiral, we've been monitoring the situation," Williams began. "The Corvaxi have also transmitted their demands to every major government on Earth. They want us to stand down and allow them to harvest Zephyr Prime without interference." "And our response?" Chen asked. Though she already knew the answer, Williams's expression hardened. "The Global Defense Council was unanimous. Humanity stands by its allies. We will not abandon the Zephyrians to save ourselves." A murmur of approval rippled through the command center. This was what humanity was. They were the species that ran toward the fire when everyone else ran away. They were the ones who stood up to bullies, even when the bully was 10 times their size. "Admiral," Williams continued, "you are authorized to use any means necessary to defend our allies. The full weight of human military might is at your disposal." Chen nodded. "Understood, Madam President. We won't let them down." As the transmission ended, Chen turned to her crew. These men and women represented the best of humanity, They had trained for this moment their entire careers, even if they never thought it would come so soon. "Send word to all human ships in the sector," Chen commanded. "We're mobilizing everything we have, every destroyer, every cruiser, every support vessel. And contact the research stations. I want every prototype weapon, every experimental technology, every crazy idea our scientists have been working on." "Ma'am, even with everything we have, the numbers," Commander Kim began. "Don't give me numbers," Chen interrupted. "Give me options. The Korvaxi think they understand warfare, but they've never fought humans. They've never faced a species that sees impossible as just another word for challenge accepted." Within hours, the greatest military mobilization in human history was underway. Ships poured out of Earth's orbital shipyards, emergency crews working around the clock to load weapons and supplies. The Mars Defense Fleet abandoned their posts to join the Armada. Even civilian ships were being retrofitted with whatever weapons could be mounted on their hulls. Dr. Elizabeth Hayes, head of Human Military Research and Development, contacted the Defiance directly. Her image appeared on Chen's personal screen, excitement barely contained despite the dire circumstances. "Admiral, we've been waiting for authorization to field test Project Prometheus," she said, referring to humanity's most classified weapon system. If we're really doing this, if we're really going to war with the Korvaxi, then it's time." Chen had read the classified files on Prometheus. It was based on human ingenuity and the one thing that separated them from every other species in the galaxy: their absolute refusal to accept defeat. Where other species developed more powerful weapons, humans developed smarter ones. Where others built bigger ships, humans built faster ones. Where others relied on superior numbers, humans relied on superior tactics. "Do it," Chen authorized. "Deploy everything. If we're going to make a statement to the galaxy, let's make sure they never forget it." As the human fleet gathered, word spread throughout the galaxy. On every world, in every space station, beings watched the impossible unfold. Humanity, the youngest and weakest of the galactic species, was preparing to challenge the Korvaxi Empire. Most species viewed it as noble suicide. The Korvaxi had conquered civilizations that were thousands of years older than humanity. They had weapons that could sterilize entire star systems. Their ships were protected by energy shields that had never been breached. But in the taverns of Centauri Station, in the data networks of the Andromedans, in the crystal gardens of New Zephyr, a different conversation was beginning. Old-timers spoke of human history, of how this young species had a disturbing habit of winning wars they should have lost. On the bridge of the Korvaxi flagship, Supreme War Chieftain Vector received the reports with amusement. The humans were mobilizing their entire fleet, all 300 of their primitive vessels armed with kinetic weapons and basic energy shields. It would be over in minutes. "Shall we delay the harvest to deal with this inconvenience, War Chieftain?" his tactical coordinator asked. Vector's 4 eyes glowed with predatory satisfaction. "No, let them come. When the galaxy sees how easily we crush their would-be heroes, there will be no more foolish thoughts of resistance. We will make an example of humanity that will echo through the stars for 1,000 generations." Admiral Chen stood in the observation deck of the Defiance, looking out at the assembled human fleet. 300 ships against 10,000. By any rational calculation, they were about to sail into their own extinction. But rationality had never been humanity's strong suit. They were the species that had climbed out of caves and built starships. They were the ones who had looked at the impossible distances between stars and said, "Let's go there anyway." "All ships report ready for hyperspace jump," Rodriguez announced. Chen took one last look at Earth, visible as a pale blue dot in the distance. Somewhere down there, 8 billion humans were watching, hoping, praying that their champions would succeed. "Signal the fleet," Chen commanded. "Today we show the galaxy what humanity stands for." We show them that some things are worth fighting for, no matter the odds. Jump to hyperspace. Let's go defend our friends. The human fleet vanished into the swirling vortex of hyperspace, racing toward a confrontation that would either establish humanity as a force to be respected in the galaxy or see them wiped from existence entirely. But as the ships traveled through the impossible space between stars, every human aboard knew one thing for certain. They would rather die defending their allies than live knowing they had abandoned them. The Korvaxi thought they understood warfare. They were about to learn that they had never faced an enemy like humanity. An enemy that didn't just fight with weapons and ships, but with something the galaxy had forgotten. The unbreakable spirit of those who refused to bow to tyrants. The greatest battle in galactic history was about to begin, and for the first time in 3 centuries, the Korvaxi were going to face an enemy that had absolutely nothing to lose and everything to prove. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zephyr system like a storm breaking over calm waters. Admiral Chen watched the tactical display populate with enemy contacts, each red dot representing a Korvaxi vessel larger than anything in the human navy. The numbers were staggering, but Chen had stopped caring about numbers the moment they decided to make this stand. Korvaxi fleet detected, Lieutenant Torres announced from the sensor station. Confirmed count, 9,743 vessels. They're maintaining a blockade formation around Zephyr Prime. Any response from the planet? Chen asked. Yes, ma'am. High Curator Vexthan is requesting permission to coordinate defensive efforts. Their orbital platforms are still operational, but barely. Chen nodded. The Zephyrians had managed to hold out longer than anyone expected, but their crystal-based technology, while elegant and efficient, wasn't designed for this kind of sustained warfare. They were artists and philosophers, not warriors. Open a channel to the Korvaxi fleet, Chen ordered. Let's see if we can negotiate. Her officers exchanged glances. Everyone knew this wasn't really about negotiation. This was about making a statement that would echo across the galaxy. The main screen filled with the image of Supreme War Chieftain Vector. The Korvaxi was an imposing figure, standing nearly 3 meters tall with 4 arms ending in razor-sharp claws. His species had evolved from pack hunters, and it showed in every line of his predatory form. I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Defense Fleet, she began, her voice carrying across space with unwavering authority. You will cease your attack on Zephyr Prime and withdraw from this system immediately. Vector's laugh was a sound like breaking glass. Human, you amuse me. Your entire species could fit inside one of my cargo holds. You bring 300 primitive vessels against the might of the Korvaxi Empire and demand that we withdraw? I'm not demanding, Chen replied calmly. I'm telling you. Leave now, or we will make you leave. The war chieftain's 4 eyes narrowed. Your species' reputation for foolish bravery precedes you. Very well. I will give you one opportunity to demonstrate your strength. Send your best ship to face mine in single combat. When I destroy it, the rest of your fleet will surrender and witness the harvest of Zephyr Prime. Chen looked around her bridge. Every officer wore the same expression of grim determination. They had all volunteered for this mission, knowing the odds. They were here because somebody had to stand up to bullies, and apparently, humanity was the only species crazy enough to try. Accepted, Chen said. But when my ship destroys yours, your entire fleet withdraws from Zephyr space permanently. Vector's amusement was genuine. Agreed, human, though your confidence will be your epitaph. The channel closed, and Chen turned to her crew. Well, you heard him. We're going to fight the biggest, most advanced warship in Korvaxi space. Any thoughts? Commander Kim pulled up the tactical profile of Vector's flagship. The Void Destroyer is 4 times our size, with weapons that outrange anything we have. Their shields have never been breached. and their armor is a meter-thick composite that can withstand direct hits from stellar plasma cannons. "What about Project Prometheus?" Chen asked. Dr. Hayes appeared on the communications screen from her position on the engineering deck. "We've installed the prototype systems, but they're completely untested in combat conditions. We're talking about technology that pushes the boundaries of known physics." Chen smiled grimly. "Perfect, because we're about to push the boundaries of known warfare." The Defiance moved forward, separating from the human fleet. Behind them, the other ships took defensive positions, ready to continue the fight if their flagship fell. On Zephyr Prime, billions of crystalline beings watched their fate unfold in the darkness of space. The Void Destroyer was a monument to Korvaxi military doctrine, overwhelming firepower and impenetrable defense. Its hull was black as the void between stars, studded with weapons that could crack moons. Energy readings from the massive ship were off the charts. "They're powering weapons," Torres reported. "Multiple plasma cannons, gravitational disruptors, and what looks like a planet-killer torpedo." "Evasive maneuvers," Chen ordered, "and activate Project Prometheus." Deep in the Defiance's engine room, systems that had been theoretical just months ago came online. Human scientists had studied every battle the Korvaxi had ever fought, analyzed every tactic, every strategy. What they discovered was that the Korvaxi fought like apex predators, direct, brutal, and overwhelming. But humanity had learned to fight differently. They had learned from wolves and gorillas, from asymmetrical warfare and desperate last stands. Where the Korvaxi brought force, humanity brought cunning. The first exchange of fire lit up space between the two ships. The Void Destroyer's plasma cannons, each shot powerful enough to level a city, reached out toward the Defiance. But the human ship moved like nothing the Korvaxi had ever seen. "Dimensional slide successful," Dr. Hayes reported. "We're phasing in and out of normal space-time at microsecond intervals." It was humanity's ace in the hole, a propulsion system that didn't just move through space, but briefly stepped outside of it entirely. The Korvaxi weapons, designed to track objects in normal space, couldn't lock onto a target that technically didn't exist for half the time. The Defiance returned fire, its kinetic railguns hurling depleted uranium slugs at a significant fraction of light speed. The shots sparked harmlessly off the Void Destroyer's shields. "No effect," Kim reported. "Their shields are absorbing everything we're throwing at them." Chen nodded. She had expected as much. The first phase of the battle was reconnaissance. They needed to understand their enemy before they could defeat them. "Launch drones," she ordered. "Full spectrum analysis. I want to know everything about that ship." Dozens of small craft detached from the Defiance, swarming around the massive Korvaxi vessel like insects around a giant. The Void Destroyer's point defense systems engaged, destroying many of the drones, but not before they gathered critical data. "Admiral," Torres called out, excitement in his voice. "I'm reading harmonic resonance patterns in their shield matrix. Dr. Hayes was right about the theoretical vulnerability." Every shield system in the galaxy operated on the same basic principle: energy barriers that deflected or absorbed incoming attacks. But human scientists had theorized that any energy field could be disrupted if you could match its resonant frequency and create destructive interference. "Prometheus targeting system online," Dr. Hayes announced. "Calculating harmonic patterns now." The Void Destroyer fired again, this time with its gravitational disruptors. Space itself twisted around the Defiance as the Korvaxi weapons tried to crush the human ship with artificial gravity fields. But the dimensional slide technology kept the ship dancing between dimensions, never quite where the weapons expected it to be. "Got it," Dr. Hayes shouted. "Frequency match in 30 seconds. Vector's voice crackled across the communication channel. "Impressive, humans. You fight like the pest insects of our homeworld. Annoying, but ultimately harmless. End this charade and die with dignity." "Counteroffer," Chen replied, watching the targeting solution solidify on her screen. "You surrender now, and we'll let you leave with your ship intact." The war chieftain's roar of rage echoed through space as the Void Destroyer unleashed every weapon in its arsenal. The barrage was devastating, a display of firepower that could have destroyed entire fleets. But the Defiance continued its impossible dance, weaving between dimensions while its computers calculated the exact frequency needed to bring down the Corvaxi shields. "Frequency locked," Dr. Hayes announced. "Firing Prometheus cannon." The weapon that emerged from the Defiance's hull didn't look like much. It was smaller than the railguns, barely visible against the bulk of the ship. But when it fired, it sent out a beam of pure, focused energy that didn't try to overpower the Corvaxi shields. Instead, it sang to them. The harmonic frequency hit the Void Destroyer's shield matrix and created a cascade failure that raced around the entire ship in seconds. The impenetrable barriers that had protected Corvaxi vessels for centuries simply stopped working. "Shields down!" Kim shouted. "Their entire defensive grid is offline." But Chen wasn't finished. As the Void Destroyer's crew scrambled to restore their shields, the Defiance launched its real surprise: boarding pods. "You want to know what makes humans different?" Chen asked as she watched the pods streak toward the enemy ship. "We don't just fight from a distance. Sometimes we get up close and personal." The pods, each carrying a squad of human Marines, struck the Void Destroyer's hull and began cutting their way inside. What followed was something the Corvaxi had never experienced: humans fighting in the corridors of their own ship. The Marines moved through the massive vessel like ghosts, using their smaller size and superior agility to outmaneuver the larger Corvaxi warriors. They had trained for this scenario, studying the layout of Corvaxi ships and developing tactics specifically for close-quarters combat against an enemy twice their size. "Ma'am, Marine Squad Alpha has reached their engineering section," came the report from the Surface Action Commander. "They're placing charges on the main power distribution network." On the bridge of the Void Destroyer, alarms blared as human saboteurs systematically disabled critical systems. Vector raged at his subordinates, unable to understand how his mighty warship was being torn apart from within by a handful of tiny bipeds. "Admiral," Dr. Hayes called out, "we're detecting massive power fluctuations in their main reactor. Whatever our Marines are doing, it's working." Chen opened a channel to the Corvaxi flagship. "War Chieftain Vector, your ship is crippled and your crew is being systematically dismantled by human Marines. I suggest you surrender before they reach something really important." The response was a stream of Corvaxi war curses that the translation software couldn't properly render. But the meaning was clear. Vector would rather die than surrender to what he saw as inferior beings. "His choice," Chen muttered. Then louder: "All Marines, execute extraction protocol. We're finishing this now." The boarding pods detached from the Void Destroyer just as the charges the Marines had planted throughout the ship detonated. Not enough to destroy the massive vessel, but sufficient to cripple its weapons, shields, and propulsion systems. The Void Destroyer, pride of the Corvaxi fleet, drifted helplessly in space. Its mighty weapons were silent, its impenetrable shields were down, and its engines were dead. For the first time in Corvaxi history, their most powerful warship had been defeated by an enemy they had dismissed as primitive. The silence that followed the battle was deafening. Across the galaxy, beings who had been watching the confrontation stared in disbelief. The humans had done the impossible. They had defeated the Corvaxi in single combat. On Zephyr Prime, the crystalline cities rang with harmonic songs of celebration. High Curator Vexthan transmitted personally to Admiral Chen. "The Zephyrian people are in your debt, Admiral. You have shown the galaxy that there are still those who will stand against tyranny." But Chen knew the real battle was just beginning. Defeating one ship, even the flagship, wouldn't be enough to make the Korvaxi withdraw. If anything, it would enrage them. The war chieftain had lost face before his entire fleet, and Korvaxi culture demanded that such humiliation be answered with overwhelming violence. "Ma'am," Commander Kim reported quietly, "the rest of the Korvaxi fleet is moving into attack formation. All 9,000 ships, they're not retreating." Chen nodded. She had expected this. Vector would never honor their agreement now that he had been humiliated, but that was fine. Humanity hadn't come here to win a single duel. They had come to send a message to every tyrant in the galaxy. "Signal the fleet," Chen ordered. "All ships prepare for general engagement and send word to Earth Command. Tell them we've just proven that the Korvaxi can be beaten. Now let's prove they can be stopped." The Korvaxi fleet moved like a tide of death across the star system. Nearly 10,000 warships advancing in perfect formation toward the small cluster of human vessels. Supreme War Chieftain Vector, his pride shattered by his flagship's defeat, had abandoned all pretense of honorable combat. This would be total annihilation. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the Defiance watching the impossible odds approach. Around her, the bridge crew worked with the calm efficiency that marked humanity's finest. They had already achieved the impossible once today. Now they needed to do it again, but on a scale that defied belief. "Ma'am, we're receiving transmissions from across the galaxy," Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez reported. "The Andromedans, the Centauri Federation, even the Stellar Commune are watching. This battle is being broadcast on every major network." Chen nodded grimly. "Good. Let them watch. Let every species see what happened when someone finally stood up to the Korvaxi. Win or lose, this moment would change everything." "Any word from the reinforcement request?" she asked. Commander Kim checked his displays. "Negative. The nearest human defense fleet units are still 6 hours out. The Galactic Council forces are declining to engage pending a full assessment of the situation." A bitter smile crossed Chen's lips. Of course, the Council was staying out of it. They had grown comfortable with the status quo, content to let the Korvaxi rampage across the galaxy as long as they left the major powers alone. It was easier to sacrifice smaller species than risk their own comfortable existence. "Admiral," Dr. Hayes called from the engineering station, "I'm detecting massive energy buildups across the Korvaxi fleet. They're charging planet-killer weapons, multiple ships." Chen's blood ran cold. Planet killers were exactly what they sounded like, weapons capable of cracking worlds. The Korvaxi had used them before, turning entire planets into asteroid fields to make examples of species that resisted too stubbornly. "They're targeting Zephyr Prime," Torres confirmed. "If those weapons fire..." 8 billion crystalline beings lived on Zephyr Prime, an entire civilization that had committed no crime except offering friendship to humanity when they were new to the galaxy. Now they were about to pay the ultimate price for that kindness. "How long until the weapons are charged?" Chen asked. 18 minutes, came the reply. 18 minutes to save a world. 18 minutes to prove that humanity's promise meant something. 18 minutes to show the galaxy that some lines could not be crossed. Chen activated the fleet communication channel. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen. The Korvaxi are preparing to commit genocide. They think they can murder billions of innocent beings to make a point about their power. They're wrong. Today we show them what human power looks like." The response was immediate. Every captain in the human fleet acknowledged, their voices carrying the same grim determination that had brought them this far. They were outnumbered 30 to 1, facing weapons that could destroy planets, but they were human. Impossible odds were just another day at the office. "Implement Alpha Protocol," Chen ordered. "All ships, full dispersal pattern. We're not fighting a conventional battle anymore." The human fleet scattered like seeds on the wind, each ship racing in a different direction at maximum speed. To outside observers, it looked like humanity was finally showing sense and retreating. But Chen had studied the Korvaxi for years, and she knew their greatest weakness. They thought like predators. Predators focused on the biggest threat, the most obvious target. They were used to fighting prey that either ran in terror or stood and fought conventional battles. They had never faced an enemy that deliberately split up to maximize chaos. "Ma'am, Korvaxi fleet is responding," Kim reported. "They're breaking formation to pursue individual ships. They're taking the bait." Each human ship became the center of its own running battle, leading dozens of Korvaxi vessels on wild chases through the outer system. The humans used every trick in their arsenal. Asteroid fields for cover, gravity wells to slingshot around planets, even the system's star itself as a shield. But this wasn't just about evasion, it was about positioning. "All ships, report status," Chen commanded, as the Defiance led a pack of 50 Korvaxi ships on a high-speed chase past Zephyr Prime's largest moon. The responses came back quickly. Every human ship was exactly where Chen wanted them to be, scattered throughout the system in a three-dimensional web that surrounded the Korvaxi fleet. "Execute Omega Protocol," Chen announced. "All ships, activate Prometheus arrays simultaneously, target designated coordinates." What happened next would be talked about in military academies for centuries to come. Instead of targeting Korvaxi ships directly, the human fleet fired their harmonic disruption weapons at empty space throughout the system. To the Korvaxi, it looked like humanity had finally panicked and was firing wildly. But the weapons weren't targeting empty space. They were targeting the quantum foam that existed between normal matter, the underlying fabric of space-time itself. And when 300 harmonic beams struck precisely calculated coordinates simultaneously, they created something that had never existed before, a system-wide resonance cascade. Dr. Hayes had theorized it was possible, but the math was so complex that even human computers could barely handle the calculations. The idea was elegant in its simplicity. If you could create harmonic interference on a large enough scale, you could temporarily disrupt the quantum fields that allowed faster-than-light technology to function. The effect was immediate and devastating. Every ship in the Zephyr system, human and Korvaxi alike, suddenly found their hyperspace drives offline. Their weapon systems flickered as quantum field generators struggled to maintain coherence. Most critically, the massive planet-killer weapons that required quantum field manipulation to function simply stopped working. "Effect confirmed," Dr. Hayes reported, excitement barely contained in her voice. "We've created a localized null quantum zone. No ship in this system can jump to hyperspace, and high-energy weapons are severely degraded." Chen smiled grimly. Now the playing field was level. The Korvaxi advantage in weapons technology had just been neutralized. This was going to come down to tactics, training, and pure human stubbornness. "All ships, attack pattern Delta. Show them how humans fight when the odds are even." The battle that followed became legend. Stripped of their overwhelming technological advantages, the Korvaxi discovered that they had forgotten how to fight a real war. They had grown accustomed to simply overwhelming their enemies with superior firepower. When that firepower was neutralized, they found themselves facing an enemy that had spent its entire existence learning how to win through superior tactics and unbreakable will. Human ships moved through the Korvaxi formations like dancers, using their smaller size and superior maneuverability to devastating effect. They fought in coordinated groups, covering each other, sharing targeting data, and working together with a precision that spoke to decades of training and an intuitive understanding of teamwork. The Korvaxi, meanwhile, fought like the individualistic predators they were. Each ship tried to claim personal glory, leading to confusion and friendly fire incidents. Their rigid command structure, designed for overwhelming weaker enemies, collapsed under the stress of facing an opponent that refused to be overwhelmed. "Korvaxi fleet is in disarray," Commander Kim reported as the Defiance led a group of human destroyers in a devastating attack run against a cluster of enemy cruisers. "We're detecting multiple collisions and communication breakdowns throughout their formation." But the tide truly turned when the impossible happened. Reinforcements arrived. "Admiral, Rodriguez called out, his voice filled with amazement. "We're detecting hyperspace signatures at the edge of the system. Multiple fleets incoming." Chen's heart sank. If more Korvaxi were arriving, this fight was over. Humanity had given everything they had, but there were limits even to human determination. Then the identification signals came through, and Chen felt her knees nearly buckle with relief. "Ma'am, it's not Korvaxi," Rodriguez announced. "It's the Andromedans, the Centauri Federation, the Stellar Commune, and... Admiral, it's half the galaxy. They're coming to help." The quantum null field was localized to the immediate area around Zephyr Prime, allowing ships to jump in at the system's edge before moving to normal space to join the battle. And what a sight it was! Hundreds of ships from dozens of different species, all flying toward the same goal. High Admiral Kethva of the Andromedan Navy was the first to reach the battle zone. Her transmission to the human fleet carried across space with crystal clarity. "Admiral Chen, the Andromedan Republic stands with humanity. We have watched the Korvaxi terrorize this galaxy for too long. Today, it ends." Similar declarations came from every fleet that arrived. The Centauri Federation, normally cautious to the point of paralysis, had brought their entire border patrol fleet. The crystalline ethereals, who hadn't fought a war in 3 centuries, arrived with ships that sparkled like jewels in the starlight. Even species that humanity had barely met were represented. The message was clear. The galaxy had watched humanity make their stand, and it had inspired them to make their own. War Chieftain Vector's voice crackled across the communication channels, no longer confident, but tinged with something the Korvaxi had rarely experienced: fear. "This is impossible. The galaxy accepts Korvaxi dominance. This is the natural order," Admiral Chen responded, her voice carrying across space to every ship in the system, human and alien alike. "The natural order is that bullies eventually meet someone willing to stand up to them. Today, that someone is all of us." The final battle was not so much a fight as a rout. Faced with a united galaxy for the first time in their history, the Korvaxi fleet found itself completely outmatched. Their superior individual technology meant nothing against enemies who fought with coordination, determination, and most importantly, something worth fighting for. Ship after ship surrendered or fled the system entirely. The mighty Korvaxi Empire, which had seemed invincible for 3 centuries, crumbled in the face of unified resistance. By the time the quantum null field dissipated 6 hours later, the surviving Korvaxi vessels were jumping to hyperspace as fast as their drives could charge. Supreme War Chieftain Vector was among the last to retreat, his damaged flagship limping away from Zephyr Prime with its escorts. But before he left, he transmitted one final message to Admiral Chen. "This is not over, human. The Korvaxi Empire will remember this day. We will have our revenge." Chen's response was simple and delivered with the absolute certainty that had marked humanity's entire approach to this crisis. "We'll be waiting." In the aftermath of the battle, representatives from across the galaxy gathered on Zephyr Prime to witness something unprecedented: the formation of the Galactic Defense Alliance. Species after species stepped forward to pledge mutual defense against any aggressor, with humanity and the Zephyrians as founding members. High Curator Vexthon spoke for billions of crystalline beings when he addressed the assembled delegates. "Today we learned that there are still those willing to fight for what is right. The Zephyrian people propose that this alliance be built on the human principle that has saved us all: that the strong have a duty to protect the weak, not exploit them." Admiral Chen stood before the gathering, still wearing her battle-stained uniform, and spoke words that would be quoted for generations. The Korvaxi ruled through fear because they believed the galaxy was too divided and too afraid to stand together. They were wrong. Today we proved that when free beings unite against tyranny, no force in the universe can stand against them. The applause that followed echoed across Zephyr Prime's crystal cities and through hyperspace transmissions across the galaxy itself. The Korvaxi Empire still existed, still controlled vast territories, but their aura of invincibility was broken forever. They had learned that the galaxy would no longer passively accept their dominance. Months later, as Admiral Chen walked through the halls of the New Alliance headquarters being constructed in orbit around Earth, she reflected on how much had changed. Humanity was no longer the new species struggling to find its place in galactic society. They were recognized as the catalyst that had united the galaxy against tyranny. But perhaps more importantly, they had proven something about themselves that even they hadn't been certain of. When faced with impossible odds in defense of what they believed in, humans would rather die fighting than live surrendering. The message had been sent to every corner of the galaxy, to every would-be conqueror and tyrant. Humanity speaks for those who cannot speak for themselves. They defend those who cannot defend themselves. And they will never, ever back down from a fight that needs fighting. The age of Korvaxi dominance was over. The age of galactic unity had begun. And at the heart of it all was a species that had looked at the word impossible and decided it was just another challenge to overcome. In the end, that was what made humanity special. Not their technology, not their weapons, but their absolute refusal to accept that some things couldn't be changed. They had looked at a galaxy cowering under the heel of the strongest predator species ever known, and they had simply said, "No more." That was enough to change everything.